Welcome. The eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me. That's one of the profound and enigmatic statements by the person we are looking at today, because it's time for us to look at another book or another teaching, as we do from time to time. And for today, I have a wonderful treat for you in store. I'll tell you in a minute what it is. But before I do, just a reminder that this is not an academic lecture, nor is it a university. So we are approaching, when we look at a book, we're approaching it in a different way, not analytically or historically, but attempting to go to the very essence of whatever teaching the book contains. Now, to go to the very essence of a teaching, a spiritual teaching, it's always that, you have to go to the very essence of who you are. The teaching is there, no matter whether it's a contemporary spiritual teaching or whether it's 2,000 years old or older. The spiritual teaching is never about anything that's not you. It's always about you. So when we look at a book, as we do from time to time here and again today, we're not really examining a book. We're looking at you, or rather you are looking at yourself through the medium of a particular spiritual teaching. So we are not studying anything outside of you. That would be pointless. Could be entertaining, but so you can always go to university to do that. There's a place for that too. But here we are concerned with something more vital. And that is the essence of who you are. So that you can realize that essence and begin to live from and through that essence that is beyond the personality. So for our book today, first let me say, today it's not really a book as such, although it comes of course in the form of a book. It's a teaching, and there are various books that contain parts of that teaching. For today we travel back in time about 700 years to the Middle Ages in Europe. That's on the surface. In essence, of course, it's always now, as you'll see. We go back 700 years in time, and we are going to look at the teachings of my namesake, Meister Eckhart, who was born around 1260 in Germany and was, of course, a monk, the only people at the time who could read and write. And he was a monk in the Dominican order, became an important figure in the Dominican order, a well-known, famous teacher, taught in Paris and other places. And Meister Eckhart was forgotten for a few hundred years and then rediscovered about the 19th century or so. He's sometimes called a philosopher, but he's not really a philosopher. He's a mystic, yes, and basically a spiritual teacher, one of the most profound, powerful spiritual teachers ever. He taught, of course, within the confines of the church at that time. So there was always, looking over his shoulder, so to speak, the thought police of the institution of the church, because one wrong thought expressed in public could easily lead to your death, and not a very pleasant death. So he taught within the confines of that, and it's a miracle, and it's how he was able to give birth to a powerful, vitally alive spiritual teaching within the confines of the terminology that he had to use. Towards the end of his life, more and more critical voices came, and he was finally condemned. His teaching was condemned by the church authorities, the Pope, the Vatican, and luckily, just before the news reached him that his teachings had been condemned, he passed away. One interesting fact about his teachings is that the most powerful teachings of his, which are called the German sermons, were delivered mostly to women, to audiences of nuns, because he was responsible, it was one of his jobs, to be a spiritual advisor of convents. So he would go into convents and deliver his powerful, profound teachings in the German language. That was also revolutionary, because up till then, virtually all teachings of that kind were given in Latin. So he was one of the first to use the vernacular in any country. And those are the most powerful teachings. The way he uses language is absolutely unique. He sometimes creates his own words. Now we, of course, are going to look at his teaching in translation into English. It is certainly more powerful in the original, as it's usually the case when you translate an inspired text, it suffers a little in the translation, but that's fine. In any case, even if you could read and speak German fluently, you would still not be reading the original, because the original language in which he spoke is the old form of German, which would be very hard, even if you knew modern German, for you to decipher. It's called Middle High German. So even a German reader would need to read the translation. It's more distant from modern German than Chaucer is in English, is to modern English. I believe the fact that he was teaching women was a very important factor in what came through him. If you look at some of his Latin sermons, which are mostly given in more conventional academic settings, they are not as powerful, they are more conventional and drier than the German sermons. So he found in the female audience, I would say, a much greater receptivity for his teachings. And probably his teachings would not be in existence if he had not had that receptive female audience. Because, as the ancient saying goes, the teacher and the taught together produce the teaching. So let's look at some of his teachings. It's not a systematic philosophy. We can take almost any fragment of Meister Eckhart. Meister, by the way, means master. That was his academic title. Nobody knows for sure whether Eckhart was his first name or his last name. We can take almost any fragment out of the teaching, look at it, and see that in many cases, almost any fragment, already contains the whole. That's the beauty of the great spiritual teachings. So let's look at the little fragment I started with, and I'll read to you. Oh, by the way, I will occasionally refer to this book of Meister Eckhart. It's a Penguin classic. Selected talks, sermons by Meister Eckhart, selected writings. There are other books that contain other selections by him. I've also scribbled down a few other quotes from one or two other books, which I may read to you.